How we doing? This is your host, Jasan Julius, and I am the host of the Julius Files. Tonight, I brought on a very special guest. The Julius Files is based on Entrepreneurial Chronicles because I'm a big believer in accountability and making sure that if you're going to do something, that you do something eyes wide open. And that only occurs if you put the information out there. And there is a lot of different ways that people to find their way into their entrepreneurial journey. And when I started, I really didn't have much guidance out there. And I was lucky enough to come across this man because he actually helped me get my business off the ground in radio. So I have brought on Allan James, and Allan is pretty well known in this area. And he has I'm going to say, his entrepreneurial journey that I know has been a safer route because he pursued his passion and actually traveled through the ranks of learning all of the aspects before he actually started on his entrepreneurial journey and became an owner. But I just knew that Allan would have a lot to say when it came to entrepreneurship and marketing, which is the cornerstone of any entrepreneurial journey. So it's time to hear Allan's story, and we'll see where this conversation goes. How we doing tonight, Allan?
Yeah, I'm cool. I actually worked on the radio today, so that's living up to the level of discipline that I have as a broadcaster. Just because I'm an owner doesn't mean I won't do the work. And
that's exactly it right there. You're finding out that even as an entrepreneur, sometimes there's maybe a little bit of backsliding back into your background of where you actually came from, because I know that running all the radio stations, you're juggling a lot, but from time to time, you're called back to the roots of actually going on the air yourself.
Yeah, it's the art. One of the things about my story that I don't really talk about, because, you evolve in a career in entertainment. And my roots actually take me back to being one of the last DJs that worked at night. And for people around here, you would remember the legendary station WLS in Chicago, legendary night jocks like, John Landecker and Chris Davis and some of the guys that I listened to and crafted, the DJ, nighttime energy, just having a ball with the music from song to song and tying things together and really appealing to teens. In the 60s, 70s, and then part of the 80s, there was still that art form out there, night jocking. And that's where I started. Recently, in fact, I was kind of reflecting on that art form, which is gone because, like everybody else, when you start out in a business, you start out at the bottom. And unfortunately, nighttime radio was the bottom, even though it was probably the most appealing to the teenage girls that were listening.
Well, that's what I was about to say. You really had to climb the ranks, because when I found you, you were running the morning show, and it was like you had to prove yourself in order to be able to get that slot. Yeah,
at night, every night jock in the business was not making a lot of money. And I was I wasn't on WLS. I'm not trying to claim that at all, but I did have the opportunity to be, my first big station was a 100,000 watt FM in Fairmont, Minnesota. And a 100,000 watt FM station is not seen at all in this part of the country. When you get out to those lesser populated areas in the middle of the country, the FCC licenses those big sticks to reach enough people to make a difference. So you imagine listening to an FM station that actually is carried from one end to the other for over 200 miles, which is quite a distance.
So that's a distance then.
Yeah, okay. Whereas AMs like, a clear channel like AM 89 WLS would then go coast to coast at night on the AM band. So being on the FM band, the best you could do would be a 100,000 watt station. So that's what I was on. So you just had so many kids that listened to you, and that's where I started. And the problem was you didn't make any money, so you were always trying to get to the bigger shows, which were morning shows. So I had my sights set on morning shows. My first morning show was in Santa Barbara, California when I was 21.
Really? So you spent some time in California then?
Yeah, about a year. It didn't really work because I didn't fit California. If I had to do it all over again, and I dream about this, even to this day, I dream about how I should have done California. Just
maybe chosen New York or just?
No, not so much the geography. It was just, you're starstruck out there, and I was in Santa Barbara, so you're up on the north end of Southern California. So, yeah, there were trips down into L.A. and the stars, not the movie stars, but, the music, people. You get a chance to meet, big stars like Billy Joel and, Lionel Richie and the people that were really big in the 80s, so you're part of something that's, you're kind of starstruck by it. At least I was.
Well, but I'm imagining you're going to be pretty young at that.
Yeah, I was 21. Okay. Didn't fit, so I come screaming back.
21 in the 80s, man. Billy Joel was a big deal.
Yeah, they all were. I mean, they were the big artists of that time. But I come screaming back to the Midwest after about a year in California, and got my first management gig actually right away. Program director in a small city in Minnesota, Albert Lee, Minnesota. That's where so here I am. What was that? That was 87. So I'm 22 by that point, and I'm in a program director position, which I had the opportunity early in my career to be sculpted by some pretty good people in the industry, consultants that really helped me to create the art form, pave the way for my career. So right away, you could be a teacher at a young age, and I've got some friends that have done pretty good in this business. Gone to New York, and one particular guy, we stay in touch. He's in New York, so there's a lot of guys that just kept building on the DJ career,
Okay.
But I was always a little more family-oriented, a little more rooted. Didn't want to just be this fly-by-night jock on the radio.
Well, and you definitely, because when I came across you, you were very much, 92.5 was your home, very much a family, because it was in between, it was nowhere near country, not classic rock, but that right in that middle where it was very family-oriented, and you were a major personality in this community, being involved as very family and community-oriented.
Yeah, I was 30 when I came to Kokomo, so the development that I went through, from like 1987 to 1995 when I came to Kokomo, a lot of studying of Chicago personalities and what Chicago radio stations were doing. I got a thrill out of promotion. I got a thrill out of the radio personality who could make a difference in charity, make a difference in some of the bits that you do that were creative. That image of, I used to always tell people that I know a little about a lot of things. So some might say that's just enough to make you dangerous. And that's pretty much what it was. You knew what to prey on the air to get that edge without going past the line.
Yeah, but that's the whole point, though. And because when it comes to the entrepreneurship, you find people to surround yourself with that know a lot about a little, but the entrepreneur knows a little about a lot, so that you are dangerous in many different areas. So, yeah, it sounds like you actually moved away from the DJ and found or caught the marketing bug and what you were capable of doing with the actual platform itself, just by having the voice and being able to be on air and being able to connect with organizations and with groups beyond just the night DJ that was actually promoting to and entertaining kids.
Right. It was really what dawned on me was, because I had this ability to interpret things correctly and to turn around and be able to articulate it, that became the the foundation for what was making me successful as a broadcaster. So then when you're able to do that and you become a good thinker and you interpret things correctly, then you get attractive in leadership. And in Kokomo, that's what happened. As much as the on-air stuff was popular, it was the work that I was doing off of the air, serving on the board of directors. I mean, think about the different things I did that were non-for-profit board services. I think the first one was Red Cross.
Really?
Yeah, I grew all the way to the chapter chair of the Red Cross here. That was in the late 90s. Then I was, because of that, I was on the St. Joseph Hospital Foundation Board of Directors and learned so much about health care.
Yeah, but that right there, now I'm finding out how you actually went about ingraining yourself in the community. And that was off air. Okay.
Yeah, and then YMCA, that was a big one. I really, really loved my service on the board there for about 11 years that I was on that board. Grew to become chair of the Y board for a couple of years, but I was learning because there's not that much difference between a non-for-profit organization and a for-profit organization when it comes to all the things you have to do to develop them, market them, fundraising or sales. Which one do you want it to be?
Exactly.
So I'm learning.
It's a tax accounting.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm learning all these things. The Convention Visitors Bureau, I was appointed to that. And so these, I guess, extra duties that I had on top of my job as a broadcaster, as an ops manager for Mid-America Radio, it all helped to cultivate all parts of what this whole thing was
that well-rounded, yeah.
Yeah, and then there was a missing piece, and as I was getting to the end of my time on the air here in Kokomo, Mid-America Radio sold in 2009, and a parent company was Vox Communications, but locally they're known as Hoosier AM/FM. They purchased the Kokomo and the Marion stations in 2009, so the ownership change was kind of a shocker. Mm-hmm. Because it would have been 14 years I'm working for more of a local owner, at least an Indiana owner.
Exactly.
Versus working for a group that's outside of the state of
corporate.
Indiana. Yeah. Yeah. Certainly corporate, because those guys were all from Clear Channel, and they got their own stations and had a vision for how they wanted things to go. Trouble was their vision and my vision were different. And it wasn't that my vision was so off. It was just that I had built so much myself, to what that radio station, Z92.5, was about. And when they came in, they had a different vision for what the radio station was going to be for them.
And you're saying that this is like 2009, 2010?
Well, 2009 is when they purchased the station. So I was with them for 3 years. So each year, it just more and more pressure, I guess, was applied to how they wanted me to run the radio stations, and I was resistant to that. And at the time, I didn't see it as much as I see it in retrospect.
Yep.
And I don't condemn them for what they wanted. I mean, they had the right. They owned the stations, and they reminded you all the time. They would say, "This is our radio station. We get to call the shots." But I have, 15 years of building what that show was all about. And that's the kind of things that introduced you and I together, because when you start to look at the body of work that I had accomplished, especially when we got into the 2000s, I think about just about every decent restaurant in Kokomo came through our studio every week. It was just like, you had Coffee Junkies, you had Posterific, you had Pizza Hut, you had Texas Roadhouse, you had Damon's, which was in
way
business.
Back when,
at that time. You had the smaller ones that just wanted to be part of it, like Nina Broniak or, there's so many names I can't even remember them all.
The thing is, all the years we've known each other, you've never actually timelined all of that stuff. And again, I got a grateful mindset, but I think back now and I'm like, I was getting the best of Allan James. When you stepped in 2005, 2006, you had really shaped, because when you came in to help me, it was yes, you were very much coming as the leader of the actual radio station, but you were able to guide me and say that this is how you want to present your message. I'm looking at your menu. These are the pieces that are standing out to me. You should really lean into this, because I remember even our turned up fountain Cokes with all of the syrup flavors in it. But that was the thing, is that you were my first successful impression when it came to marketing a product. And I was quite the opposite from your bosses. I was sitting here going, this guy knows what he's talking about. I need to be absorbing and listening to all of this stuff as you kind of helped me execute a plan in my beginning years of rolling out the brand itself, and I mean myself starting the process of becoming ingrained in the community.
And those are the things that I was paying attention to, was the success of it. It wasn't so much about me. It was about you. It didn't matter what I did creativity-wise. It had to work, and it had to create sales for people. And when those things were happening for, like, the Yazdanis at Posterific, they were like, hey, whatever you want to do, let's do it. And it always rang the cash register, which is the biggest part of it. So you learn those things. But I was still, with all that, I had this, I could be practical. I could connect it. It was that interpretation of what your vision was. And I loved your vision, because I loved the research that you did about the coffee bean before you decided to open a coffee shop, and so I was impressed by you. So I'm learning from you. I'm getting cues from you, and that helps me to connect what the actual promotion's going to be, or how we're going to address it from a energy level, or finding. It was always like to find a niche for everybody, like with Posterific. After meeting Cynthia Yazdani, it was like, man, this woman's got so much energy. It was like, we gotta harness this. And so right away I started calling her Chef Cynthia.
Mm-hmm. And I still remember her funny laugh that she would do on air. But she awesome. Became known for it, though. Because the thing is I'm sitting there going, it's cool to hear that, because like in my early days like that, you were like a guide to me. But to hear that, you were still learning yourself, that it was that passion was resonating.
I'm learning right now, honestly. But you took that character, and I knew that finding a character for everybody that came in was important, and it helped the listeners or the consumers to connect, mm-hmm. and everybody had their niche.
Well, wait a minute. I never got a nickname. I'm almost afraid to ask for a nickname.
There was no nickname with anybody, but I got to bring Marcia into this conversation. Because it was the Coffee Junkies girls.
Yes, you are 100% correct.
That's where it came into, because you could not get an experience at a drive-through like you could at Coffee Junkies. And let's be honest, it was really, really nice on the eyes.
No, and for full fair disclosure, Marcia is the original Coffee Junkies girl. She is also my ex-wife, and she is very easy on the eyes. Always has been, always will be. Her and Kylie were an awesome duo. To open up the business, because not only did they have great personalities, they both very much took pride in what they were doing. So the developing the relationships, along with consistently serving those great cups, and the marketing, the marketing assist and education that I was getting from you, it was that whole combined. That's why I've long said, when you want to talk about what business is, what does it take to be successful, like, it's no one thing. If you want that silver bullet, well, that silver bullet is everything. But yes, it did not hurt that that Marsha was a very beautiful woman. That's still is in full disclosure. But yes, it was the whole combined package of quality, service, and marketing. Because I look back and I think about how appreciative I am of those beginning years and your assistance when it came to the marketing and developing the message. And I'm like, I know I'm not the only person that you did that for. Because as you moved through those years, then you moved into KI, where it became about actually on the selling side of the business and developing brands through selling those packages, where you weren't necessarily on the air and you weren't able to have necessarily the public influence the way you did at 92.5, but you were more the business to business side of it. But yet another piece for that you were learning in your journey.
Yeah, it's a great transition as you've created that product, but then understanding the real fundamentals of the marketing was not something that I had actually defined or had it defined to me. Toward my last months, literally at Z, I was kind of crying out to that. I was like, I know there's more to this, and I'd like to get some more exposure to the sales side. But I don't think Vox really, I don't think they saw it. I don't know what their problem was. It was getting paid too much or what the problem was, but they chose to get rid of me.
That's about generally what it is in corporate America.
Yeah.
You got a bean counter up there that doesn't know anything about the local market or about the talent, and they're like, hey, you could replace them, cut 1/3 of the salary, and I'm sure since it's our radio station, it'll do just fine.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't know the reality of what happened from how it made them feel. When you get fired, you're like, I don't care about them anymore.
Exactly.
And within a week, KI come calling, and my friend Pam Grant, who I worked with at Z, she was already working there when she found out I wasn't at Z anymore. She was like, Mike Christopher, Jim Stonesifer, you got to go after Allan. And they did. But I'll also point out there was a tragedy that happened at the very same time as that severance was taking place. My mom passed away. And so a lot of people knew that, and they thought it was really a crummy time for Z to let me go at the same time my mom had passed. But the two were completely unrelated.
It's totally coincidental.
Yeah, but it was the best thing that ever could have happened to me, honestly, because then I got to go to KI. Now, KI, compared to Z, it was like, I guess, David and Goliath in a way. I mean, it's just like you got this monster out there that can conquer all with 50,000 watts and heritage country format, the legend of Dick and Charlie, and, I mean, just one of the biggest and best radio stations in the country, really, in small market radio.
And that's because you get a little bit deeper into that. But I mean, that combined with Weak Hair, I mean, they were like idolized and loved in this community, and that's Yeah,
so I was given an opportunity to go there and get on the business side, and they had just been purchased by one of the big companies in radio, and that's Cumulus Media. And at that time, they were still run by the founder of Cumulus Media. So with the passion that the owner of Cumulus had, they had done so much for sales training and really teaching sales training and insisting on it and constantly re-educating. And so I got to be at KI for 5 years. And in that timeline, in fact, I saw a Facebook memory pop up today. As a matter of fact, I was expressing, it was in 2012, expressing that I was given the Sales MVP Award at KI in my first year there.
Well, I mean, and that right there is pretty impressive in itself, because that's an education that you got over and above that.
It was like there was a book that defined it all for you, just finished who I could become as a broadcaster. It was the missing piece, and Cumulus and KI finished it for me. And then I I was doing pretty good, okay? I really was. By 2015, I was doing really, really good, making the most money I've ever made in my life and at that point. And it was like I was a one-man wrecking machine. I mean, I could do it all.
Well, but then I go back. That's the thing is that, I mean, I saw this, whether I worded it correctly or not, that, I mean, everything is the power of the relationship. So it was a smart call for KI to come in because they saw all the relationships that you'd spent over a decade developing, and they were out of nowhere able to harness that. And because I'm going to be honest, I would never spend my money marketing on KI until they hired you. And when they brought that I mean, because Pam tried, and time to time I would give a little bit, but the rates were expensive. Nobody could actually sell me on how it was going to truly benefit me, how I was going to get my bang for the buck. And then obviously everybody wanted to be involved in the week hair time. But when they went after you, they were at least smart enough to see they were capable of harnessing your relationships, and your relationships is what brought all that money to you and to them, because I would have never spent the money at KI that I did if it hadn't have been for my relationship with you that you were able to bring to the table with them. But I wasn't a dummy back then. I didn't just give the money because you were at KI. I gave the money because you were at KI and you, again, laid out a plan that said, I need you to spend this. And when you spend this, this is what I'm going to do. And this is the result that you're going to get out of it. And you got my buy-in, and I cut the check, and we executed on a program. And that's part of that selling, that's the relationship side. And it's even today, that is hard to find somebody that will actually stand by you and be like, as partners in a relationship that pays, we're going to stand beside each other and move forward. And if you made the most money that you ever made at that time, it's because you successfully did that with many people like me, and KI was the beneficiary of it.
It was a magical time. I really enjoyed it, and I really love week hair. I got to be in the inner circle of that. I may not have been well received. I'm going to be honest with you there, because people, I mean, the first day that I was at KI, Jay Ferguson was on the air on Mail Call, and he played, to introduce me, the Darth Vader theme.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I heard stories about...
They set you up,
yeah,
and you still rolled them.
Yeah. Well, I heard stories of the days when I was at Z where the on-air staff at KI would get yelled at. Allan James is doing this, and Allan James is doing that. What are you guys doing? And they were like, God, I hate that guy. So when I start working there, I don't think that changed. There was always this friction with the on-air staff there. It was like, they were like really leery of me, but I didn't need them because I would do my own commercials. I wrote everything. I could produce everything. I'd sell everything.
Well,
so I was just like my own little island.
There you
while
go.
I was there.
Because you brought your confidence to actually perform, and it was their egos that were getting bruised off of you just performing.
I don't know. I don't like to look at it like that, because they're colleagues or former colleagues, and I don't look at them like that. It was just a different approach. I had all this experience and all this vision, and I had all of the desire to do the work, and that's what I tell people to this day, and I always told you that I'm willing to do the work.
Exactly.
The work doesn't scare me, and sometimes it takes more time to do it right, and I will, and that's important, and that's the trust that you as an entrepreneur placed into me. So I don't change that model, but I get to the end of my time at KI, and it was tough because that company was evolving, and people were changing, and different leadership was coming in, and again, you get back to a corporate vision doesn't always support a passionate individual's ability, and corporate oftentimes will spit people out like that, and it's whether they win in the long run or not, you kind of feel like you're making a mistake by getting rid of me, pal.
Exactly.
But I left KI. But I had good reason to. And it was good timing. So now we're going to transition to the opportunity that I was given in Logansport, And it was toward the end of 2016 when the founder and owner of Mid-America Radio, who used to own Z, and he sold out to Vox in 2009, he was given his placement into the Indiana Broadcasters Association Hall of Fame.
Really?
And this was, I think, early in 2016 or maybe late 2015. But I learned about it, and I was thinking, hey, I should reach out to Dave Keister and just congratulate him for being in the Hall of Fame. So I did. And he was like, well, where are you these days? And I said, well, I was at KI. I'm a sales manager here. And he goes, you are? And he knew, because he had seen everything I had done for him at Mid-America. He knew that I had the final piece of the puzzle.
You graduated, yep.
Yeah, so then it took about a week, and then he gets back in touch with me. And he says, hey, I got an idea I want you to consider. Logansport's in pretty bad shape, and I tell you what, I'd like to see if you could go up there. If you can turn it around, I'll sell it to you, and I'll be the bank. Now, I think you get what that means.
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously, it turns out you're going to deal with a contract, but you're dealing with a multimillionaire here who can, pardon me, he can leverage his money to get me started.
And a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities out there. Everybody generally, they see these multi-million-dollar transactions. And you start getting into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay, you got investment bankers getting involved. But when it comes to small business, when you're talking about hundreds of thousands or low millions, banks are generally not involved. That is one entrepreneur to another. There's paper being carried, and the one person's being the bank. One side of it is because banks won't touch it. The other side of it is because the one individual sitting here going, okay, well, I have no problem collecting that interest myself.
Yeah, and it also supports that old notion of it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Absolutely.
But I had to turn it around and it was amazing how wise.
You had to prove that you could put your diploma to work.
True, but Dave said it before we even got to the agreement, but it was, he said, I think it'll take 3 years, and then you should be able to handle it. So that was the idea, and I came home from that conversation, and I shared it with my wife, and she was like, oh, no. Why would you want to do that? You're doing so well at KI. Why would you want to do this? But, let's face it, anybody who is progressing in a career, if you have the opportunity to, and this is kind of cliche for Logansport, but to grab the brass ring, why wouldn't you? That's where the big word risk comes into play. I understand.
Absolutely.
How many risks have you taken as an entrepreneur?
More than I should have.
Right. And I was like, there's going to be no other way for something like this to happen in my life.
But that's the thing is I believe everything happens for a reason. And the way that you cut your teeth, the way that you actually came up in more of a working with small businesses, what Cumulus became, this was a natural progression from you because your next step with them in order to continue to excel on climbing their ladder would have been into a hugely corporate environment, and that wasn't your background. This was you able to leapfrog into the next level for you to continue to run and still staying in that small business vein.
Yeah. And sadly, at the end of my tenure at KI, things were getting, there was friction there. And the big, cutaway was a little bit risky because you have a non-compete. I had a non-compete with Cumulus. And it basically is that, 50-mile radius. You can't do anything in the media.
Anything that touches their airwaves.
Yeah, exactly. So Mr. Keister was concerned that you're not going to get out of your non-compete and this is not going to work. But I played the fact that there was friction between me and immediate management to my advantage. So I was like, and my wife was totally paranoid about this move, but I was building toward this, fact that I wanted to go to and do the Logansport thing with Mid-America, but how do I get out of my non-compete? So I just went into work one day and just laid it out. And the other thing, and I got to tell the story, and you're
absolutely hey,
at the very same time, I got my friend Jasan Julius here, who takes me out to dinner and says, "Hey, I got this great opportunity for you. You could join my company and help me sell franchises." So I've got this at the very same time as the Logansport radio thing.
Because I recognized that you picked up all of the tools for selling. And and honestly, that's still a weak part for me, because I'm not overly comfortable selling. I'm very comfortable serving. But yes, I noticed that you had graduated. You were very well rounded on the entire developing the relationships that pay, and that is selling in itself. So, yeah, I mean, I felt like I made an appropriate offer, and it puts you at one of those crossroad positions. But everything happens for a reason, because honestly, I was still early, as I remember. That's
it was the end of 2016.
Yeah, exactly. And here we are now. February of 2022, I am just now actually announcing that we are officially selling franchises. So I was a little ahead of the curve. And don't get me wrong, had you accepted, things would have changed and we would have shifted into a different gear in a different direction. But I think everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, and I really was processing what you had offered me at that time. But I'm a broadcaster. I this is what I do, and I will hang on to it with all of my might and with all of my love of what this business has been for me. And so I jump into this venture basically in Logansport with the hopeful outcome that I could become a radio owner. And so now it's a whole new ball game, and I was given just basically carte blanche. Do what you got to do. Mm-hmm. Do what you got to do.
But it was a level of trust through working together for many years that allowed that ability.
Anybody who's worked for Mid-America Radio knows Carol DeMott. Now, Carol DeMott was the corporate secretary for Dave Keister for 40 years. She just finally retired at age 84. And This woman was the scariest woman on the planet to me when I worked for Mid-America Radio in Kokomo. So when I go down to Martinsville, where the corporate headquarters is for Mid-America, and Dave Keister and I are working out the details of me going to Logansport, he says, "You have to report to Carol every day." I'm like, oh, God.
You're like, wait a minute, I put that skeleton in the box. I don't want to get it back out.
Well, the funny part of the story is that when I first day there, which was actually February 1st of 2017, I've got to call and talk to Carol. So it's like, "Oh, hi, Carol." And, she's okay. So now you're there. She's got this presence. And she then tells me the story that Logansport is the just worst thing in her life. This operation was struggling so badly that even her doctors would ask her, "Okay, so how you feeling, Carol? How's Logansport?" And she'd say, "Oh, well, Logansport is doing this and doing that." And it was a tough time for her. So she laid that out for me, and I'm like, gulp, okay. So
you're just now finding out what you're truly getting into.
Well, there were a few things that I didn't know, but it's okay. I mean, there's a reason for everything, and everything's okay. For me to go in at that point, it's just about, okay, I'm going to take all of my experience, all that I've learned, and apply it. And I did. And right away, I mean, things started, it was kind of like we bottomed out right away. And then within months of that time, the best story about all of that was that Carol grew to love Logansport. She goes, now it's my favorite property, and it's just we look forward to talking every day.
Was that before or after you turned it around?
We're talking months, okay?
She caught the bug too then.
Oh, she did, because, I can't judge me. Only you can judge me. And I just
know they will.
Yeah, they do. But I've got
it's nature of the beast.
I've got plenty of haters out there, but the thing is, I've always clung to that same thing, which is I'll do the work. I'll do the work tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll start my day at 7:30 at a high school recording interviews with FFA members, and I'll finish my day covering an air shift on the river for one of my employees. And so I'll put in a long day tomorrow.
How does that feel?
I love it.
No. The feeling of my employees. Because the reality is, that's what I said. Then that's where, because I'm not sliding. It's just that there's different ways. I had this thing about where I would decide I was going to do something, and I didn't dabble my toe. I just kind of jumped in with both feet. But your path was inside of the industry, learning each facet of the industry, and that next progression was to officially become an employer,
right?
Where it's no longer just dealing with coworker personalities. Now you're on a different level dealing with those people as their employer.
Yeah, and working with people who have worked with me before, so they know some history, and either they're going to buy into what your new vision is as a general manager and then eventually an owner. And if they don't buy in, then, you're looking for new people. I can say that very few people that were on staff on February 1st of 2017 have left. I turned it around with the people that were already there. Some people left, but most stayed. But
most of them had a good understanding of you when you actually walked in the door.
Some did. Some that I actually worked with.
Your reputation preceded you.
Yeah, I hoped that they would buy in, and they have. So, fast forward to the end of 2019, everything is a go. I think it was in May of 2019. Dave Keister called and said, "Hey, I've looked over the numbers. We're a go. We're going to start the process to sell you the stations," which is about a 6-month process with the FCC. I'm like, oh boy, here we go.
So he brought it to you and said, "Hey, you're ready."
Well, he's the man. He knows. He's bought and sold so many radio stations in his life that, he knew, the moment had arrived. You got this. Okie dokie. So 6 months goes by. We closed the deal on December 31st of what year was that? That was 2019.
So 2020, January 1st.
You know where this is going.
2020.
Yeah.
Wow. Because you got to look at it. Turning 2020. You're turning the decade. The stars are aligning. You're really thinking that you're laying that yellow brick road. And
well, it was interesting too. And one of the other processes, as you know, you got to name your corporation. And I really reviewed that. I think a lot of people would have expected me, thinking that I am the egomaniac that I'm accused of being sometimes.
I never got that out of you.
Egomaniac? I don't like that term personally. It's like I don't like being called an egomaniac. I'm a passionate person, and I have, at this stage, almost 40 years of practical experience in the media. So I'm not going to argue with people.
But let's touch on that, because that's the thing, is that the egomaniac and the ego, but then you've got the difference between arrogance and confidence. And confidence is derived out of accomplishing shit. And generally, arrogance is just, you got a problem mentally and you probably haven't accomplished much, which could potentially lead to insecurity, which is counter of confidence. You had plenty of confidence. You still do. So where you say you don't like it, okay, great. You're not letting your ego get in the way. But make no mistake, The man has confidence for a reason. He accomplished a lot, but that's also that thick skin that allows you to keep pushing forward, because I know that this is where this is going, because I thought the name that you chose for your corporation was beautiful.
Thank you. And I heard that a lot. But it was an epiphany one day. I'm driving into Logansport, and I'm just trying, my accountant had called, he's setting up the paperwork for the LLC to get started, and he's like, you got to have a name. I need that. Mm-hmm. And so the pressure's on, and, names like Allan James Media, we're cool. It's like, in your face, everyone. Now it's my company, but I didn't really want to project that. So all of a sudden, and understand too, and a lot of what we did with the radio stations is we reformatted them and did new imaging for them. And we took the classic hit station, which had been known as like a Mix 102. And I thought, well, you have these two rivers, coming together in Logansport. And there weren't a lot of radio stations with this name at the time, but rebranding it as The River was good for the classic hit station. We just re-imaged the AM station with the, more of a baby boom format, as that being the brand for it, as a baby boom station.
Now, let's say, I should keep in mind Allan hadn't chimed in about this, but he doesn't hide it. Allan is a diehard Green Bay Packer fan. And generally, those people are known for being very, very tough, having lots of grit, that frozen tundra to go out there and do battle in that open stadium. And I'm saying this because he's about ready to get to what he named his company. I just thought that it speaks to your personality. It was very fitting.
Well, thank you. And we took the country station, really made it an ag service station with more ag programming than you'll hear anyplace else. Created a thing that this is what I'm working on presently, is the Farming Underground. We created that as a big thing with the youth and FFA, and
huge for Logansport.
Yeah, so we've done all this work leading up to that 3-year journey before I became owner. But I really wanted to capture the railroad history of Logansport in something. But we've kind of rebranded all the stations, and where do you fit the railroad into things? And then it dawned on me, the name of the company, and the Iron Horse Festival, the Iron Horse image of Logansport was so perfect to name the company Iron Horse Broadcasting. And the moment I made that known, every single person that heard that went, perfect.
Exactly.
And from Dave Keister to my accountant that day, oh, that's good. I like that.
But that's the you bringing all of that year's worth of marketing, mm-hmm. and deep down you knew you'd get that reaction.
Well, you never know. You hope.
Yeah.
But it has been positive. But that's how much I believe in what we're doing. The radio station in a community has to really represent its community. So in name, in brand, in service, so you owe it to them to make it about them. And I think we did everything right. So here it is, January 1, 2020. We're raring to go, ready to go. It's Iron Horse Broadcasting. So we're gearing up for doing business on our own, moving away from Mid-America Radio. And things are going great. January is a great month. We're like, oh, yeah, this is good. February is good.
I'm feeling the same way about my business and then, about that time.
And then COVID hits.
Yes.
And by the end of March, all of the national advertisers have shut off. And it's going to be 3 months, and we just didn't know what the end was going to be. The first inkling of COVID was this message from the Indiana broadcaster saying that you will need these attached credentials to go to work. They're like, what? We're shutting down things to the level that we have to have credentials to show a roadblock or Homeland Security that we're broadcasters, and essential personnel.
Little dictator-ish.
Yeah.
That's
was Coffee Junkies essential?
yes. I deemed us essential
I never
to
asked.
keep the doors open because hey, everybody's still gotta have food and drink. That's the food and beverage industry. And by and large, I mean, the food and beverage industry was the ones that were hit the hardest, but that's because they couldn't make that shift. And that shift was, that was my business from day one was built on the drive-through. Everything was drive-through focused. And then as I grew over time, I added those other elements, but the drive-through was always the heart of the business. So when they told me that I had to close down, it was like, man, this sucks. I got to close down. But I knew the power of the drive-through. I knew that I would be able to actually pay the bills. I had challenged other problems because once the government started paying people to sit at home, there was no labor pool for me to go after. The labor pool I had was the ones that were currently employed, and I paid out massive overtime because those were the only people that I actually had to keep business actually running.
Yeah, for us, it came down to choices of, a lot of the technology allowed you to kind of do it from home if you wanted to.
Did you do some remote broadcasting?
No, we stayed in the studio. I mean, we didn't have, we had some capabilities, and we certainly could have purchased a few more bells and whistles to make that work more consistently, but we talked about it. We thought, let's just behave correctly with social distancing and keep doing our thing, and we did. And I don't regret those decisions because in the first 2 years of COVID, nobody got COVID. We didn't see anybody on staff get COVID till this year. It's
like the third variant out.
Yeah.
No, that's
but we even handled that.
There's a certain fortunate there to that. Yeah.
But the beautiful part of the story is I was so dedicated to these employees, and that's from the business side, it's what they are. It's your staff.
Exactly.
And I'm not like a manager anymore. I'm an owner. So their lives, as it pertains to their job, which is what's funding their life, I had to be able to sustain them through the pandemic. And we did it. I mean, they never, ever had to worry about getting a paycheck for those 2 years. But then as the administration changed and we see the inflation happening through 2021, this is a really important story for me to tell because now we're talking about entrepreneurism and the responsibility that all of us who own businesses have to these people who count on us for their jobs and their ability to survive what's happening in the real world. What happens at the radio station is one thing, but what's happening when they go home is a completely different set of circumstances. And I sat here toward the end of 2021 as I was getting ready to do my 2022 budget, and I was thinking, it's easier for me to keep everything the same because then the company has a little bit better ability to survive. We're not going to add more expense by addressing payroll issues. So I just went around and around and around with what the right thing to do was. And my decision in creating the 2022 budget for the radio station was to invest in my people. Seriously. And I didn't necessarily have the money to do it. It was like, okay, if we're going to sustain greater salary investment with everybody here, not just select people, everybody needed something to combat inflation. That's a real thing for these people. And
absolutely.
I looked at my role as an owner of the business as holding their lives in my hand. So I chose to invest, and I told everybody when I rolled out the budget that, January 1, everybody's getting significant raises. We talk about what is inflation, 7-8%. That's what you're dealing with. So the old typical 3% raise was not going to work. So I think, I don't know what people thought. I said, but there's a caveat with this. You don't just get a raise. Here's the sales budget. Here are the sales numbers.
With more money comes more responsibility.
We've got to hit these numbers in 2022 to sustain this salary. I just literally, today is payday. It was the single highest payroll I've seen in the 5 years I've been at that property.
The single biggest payroll you've had to digest.
It's what I've seen. I mean, we've never paid out as much as we paid out in wages today.
Exactly.
But what's amazing is you put this transparency in business out there. I'm not, in my office as the mad scientist going, crunching the numbers and making decisions and not sharing the process with anybody. I shared a lot of not everything, but the bulk of the process I shared with my people in meetings. And I said, in order for me to do this, we have to grow as a company in revenue. And what's amazing, so far this year, knock on the closest thing to wood we've got, we put a aggressive goal on for January, and we finished at 108% to that goal.
That is awesome. January.
We're not even done with February, and I'm telling you, it's probably going to be like close to 130% to the aggressive goal that we set for February. Now, hey, the school is still out on March, April, and the rest of the year, but I see a group of people who work with me, and notice I say with me, not for me, with me, that have bought into the fact that, hey, this is our livelihood. We've got to do our part, and they're doing it, and it's working, and I love it. It's so exciting,
And that's leadership.
Yeah, and, you talk about entrepreneurism, and my take on that is, I'm the entrepreneur, but I'm also this person who has to care for people. And if you can do that right, then it'll all take care of itself in the end. And what's that end? For me, it's having something that hopefully can stay in my family some way, somehow, and the legacy that you're trying to create. And it doesn't hurt to travel with people like this guy, and just, to have people that you share your story with, and they tell you their story, and you learn from them, and you just continue to come back to your own business or product and say, okay, hey, how can I do this a little bit better tomorrow? Never stops, never stop learning, never stop trying to improve the service model of what we do. And in the end, you create something that people love. And that's the ultimate goal, is that people go, hey, man, I love what you're doing. And when you get that kind of recognition from the public in a business like ours, it really sustains you and motivates you to keep going.
Well, and it just seems like, because one, I tell a lot of people, one of the worst things that you can do is chase shiny things. So when I look at your overall evolution of your career, I'm like, at those key moments that you had to make decisions, was it a gut check moment? Was it a mental decision? What was it that made you actually, have you internalized to look and think of what, at each one of those key points that you made a decision, did you make it on a gut instinct, or was it a calculated move? What was it that kept you on track as you're working through these decades of life to move through these phases?
I think it's like tenure. You achieve tenure with what you're doing, and then you feel confident that you have come full circle on that particular chapter or that lesson in life and business. And so you go on to the next adventure with it, knowing that I've got that experience and service. So I don't know if it's there's a tremendous amount of risk. I mean, we've said that before. Risk is there because a lot of people don't have the courage to do it. But the courage comes from a really simple word, and that's faith. Faith. I have faith in God. I have faith in myself. I've created faith with the people that are with me in the business. And that's the difference, just have faith that there's a reason for everything you've learned up to this point.
Well, and that's a big thing with entrepreneurs is that that risk has a lot to do with the unknown. And people are creatures of habit, and they don't like change in general. And an entrepreneur is willing to venture in the unknown, thinking about the tools and skills they've developed and just being ready to put them in use in general. Because I said myself a long time ago that where you had a lot of people that were jumping into business because, we had some really good years. And anybody that started business in those years, we survived in the harder times where I was like, I remember a lot. 06, 07 were not pretty. 08 and 09 did not get any better. Anybody that started their business in the late 2000s, they didn't, I said, sooner or later the tide's going to go out and we're going to find out who's wearing clothes. You were making that transition right as that tide was going out, and it sounds like you were at least able to come back to center on doing and moving at the right time in the right way to sustain, to be able to set up for that future growth.
Yeah, and who knows what the next challenge is going to be in the economy? Who knows what the next technology that's going to threaten you with what you are currently doing? But what's interesting, because you and I have the discussion about digital versus terrestrial all the time, and I prefer terrestrial. I'm not a big digital proponent. It is something that I think we compete against in the traditions of radio. I love a company that calls themselves an internet radio station. You can't use that term technically. You're not a radio station. You don't pay the royalties to the FCC. You don't pay those dues. You don't
I like to give you a hard time. Because radio is dead, but radio is not. I think print it's on its flatlining. It's on its deathbed. But I don't think radio's dead. I just think that it has a different place. But you've talked about really ingraining yourself in the community is how you are surviving and thriving in that place, the piece of pie that is smaller today than what it used to be.
In the heyday of radio, they signed off at midnight. They weren't on the air 24/7. So things have changed a lot over the years. But the thing that when I talk about where I'm grounded in terrestrial radio, I know that I have to evolve and give an audience something they can't get anywhere else. So that's why I fight it, I guess, because I'm not going to give in to, people always say, well, why aren't you streaming? Well, it costs too much. That's the main reason why. And I don't think you get much of a yield in that platform, as a radio station. Yep. People listen to radio. And I go back, I'm a second-generation broadcaster. I remember in the 70s when my dad, being in radio, was hearing from big corporations like Todd Communications that, oh, yes, radio is going to die. When TV came into the public's view, in the 50s, well, radio is going to replace radio. And then streaming is going to replace them all, and cable is going to replace them all. And you hear those threats all the time, and I guess that's the point that I was trying to make, is that we don't know what the next threat is going to be. I totally understand who and what is threatening us today, and I always cling to, I'll do the work, so chances are I'll win.
There you go.
I'll win that battle.
Because at the end of the day, radio has its place, and it's funny because like when I moved to the Indianapolis market, like, I always supported you and I always supported the radio. But when I went to Indianapolis, it was like I didn't support the radio. Well, why didn't I support the radio? Because I would overpay for ads in Indianapolis, and it would advertise to 1 million people that could never patronize my business because it was spread out over a 20-mile radius that those people were never going to come to my establishment and give me a try, no matter how good my marketing was on the radio itself. It didn't work in Indianapolis in that way. But Kokomo was a very specific, like, if I advertised on the radio in Kokomo, anybody that heard it in Kokomo was capable of finding me and coming and actually giving me a try. Logansport is one of those types of communities where the radio stations there, if you're bringing anybody on to market their brand or to make sure their message is heard, anybody hearing that message is capable of patronizing their business. So it's an extension. You made it work, and radio's never going to die. It always has its place, and you have just mastered that place and the space that you're operating in.
Everything can die, obviously. I mean, it's business. If you don't do the business correctly, you're going to lose. So other radio stations fail. They do. A colleague of mine just turned off the AM signal in Peru. WARU went dark. They just couldn't make money there anymore. And
I questioned AM 20 years ago. So, I mean, I guess I didn't realize, I'll be honest, I've never been an AM listener.
It just happened. But
yeah.
AM, it has a life if you give it a life. That's what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. So many operators have just abandoned their AM, and it's just perhaps an automated machine that never does anything live. It doesn't serve anything real anymore. For us, I mean, we have an AM station with an FM translator, so I think most of the people who listen to the music on that station, WSAL, is listening to the FM translator at 94.9.
Wow. Well,
shameless advertising.
No. And I mean, that's what, and I will say that I mean, Allan has been in the Kokomo community and been operating in Logansport for a good long time now. So
5 years already.
I would venture to say that if you were in the Logansport area and you happen to have a business that you would like some marketing in that area, that Allan could definitely help you out because he controls 3 radio stations in that area.
All of them, yeah.
All of them
for that licensed area. But I tell you, I don't know how far you want to go on this, but I'm going to tell you a really cool story. Just happened in the last week. I had a veteran, probably a Korean War veteran, come in to my office, and he's a member of the American Legion Post 60 in Logansport. And they want to have a morning where they're going to have biscuits and gravy. Biscuits and gravy. Come on down to the Legion and have biscuits and gravy. So I said, I looked at him. I was like, what do you expect out of this? I really don't know, was his answer. And I was like, okay. You're going to compete against McDonald's. You're going to compete against Bob Evans. You're going to compete against everybody else that does breakfast in the market. Why should a consumer drop everything, their habits or whatever, and go to the American Legion for breakfast? And he was looking at me, I don't know. Okay. So
and here comes the gold.
But so we could put this on the air, right? I could just say, okay, Saturday morning, March 5th, the American Legion Post 60 is serving biscuits and gravy. Ask yourself, you got to like biscuits and gravy. What kind of a recipe is that one? You don't know. So I said, you got to have something that really appeals to the consumer to make them consider your breakfast over all the other breakfasts that they're going to have the opportunity to have that day. Well, what do you think? He says. And I don't know, it was just one of those zones, right? I was like, okay. So what would make somebody want to choose biscuits and gravy at the American Legion Post 16? How about, here we go. And I would want just like this. I go, have the men who served your country serve you breakfast.
Bam.
Now, that makes me want to go there to have that biscuits and gravy.
Exactly.
And that's the plan that we're going to do for their breakfast on March 5th. But it's like my process there, okay, is going back to connecting what they have to what people would interpret, okay? And that's what I've done for everybody along the way. And I will say I get quicker and quicker with it. But I thought, even myself, I was like, well, that was really good.
That was good.
I better copyright that one because that might go national because they'll start using it all over the place. But have you ever heard that before? I've never heard that before.
No,
it just popped into my head.
No, but
just
I gotta
looking
say,
at this guy in his desperation with his biscuits and gravy recipe.
And that's a completely different. Well, but it's about framing and it's about marketing, and that can be applied to any medium. And yes, I would definitely like to give I'm not even going to call it shameless promotion. I'll give it promotion in general. Like, folks, if you know who Allan James is, you should definitely be sharing this show. And if you're hearing it as a business owner in the Logansport area, you should definitely be giving Allan a call. Or at least talking to one of his representatives and saying, I want Allan James's take on this because he has created several marketing campaigns that have very much benefited a lot of businesses. And if you are in the Logansport area looking to grow your business, this is what Allan has built a life around. And I am proud to know him, and I'm definitely proud to call him a friend. So, Allan, thank you very much for coming in and doing the show. I was very much looking to hearing your story because, I mean, as much as we've shot the shit over the years, we've never actually truly understood or heard the entire story. I just feel fortunate to be a part of it, and I feel very blessed that our timing truly was, you were able to put a lot of talents to use, which really did help me get my business off the ground. And I want to thank you for that, because that's something I'll never forget. But guys, we're gonna wrap it up here for this episode of the Julius Files. If you got something out of it, definitely share the show. This is something that this is new for me. I'm trying to put out the stories out there so that if anybody is thinking about going into business, that much like myself when it comes to learning, you watch and you listen, and that's how you learn to save yourself a little bit of pain. So, Allan, thank you very much for coming on and do the show.
Thank you, Jason. I loved every minute of it.
All right. You guys have a good night.